Welcome, everyone. My name is Barb Hartnavy, and I am the program coordinator at the Ohio Small Business Development Center at Columbus State Community College. I wanted to thank you for joining us for this installment of our business clinic series. Today's clinic will cover business insurance, various areas of coverage, who should have it, what types of coverage, and much more information regarding different aspects of your business that you may not have thought about before. Our presenter is Sandra Moody-Gresham. She's been in insurance since 1981, and in 1998, she established Dehan Enterprises Insurance and Financial Services Agency, where she serves as managing general agent. Sandra is also a longtime supporter of the Ohio Small Business Development Center, and we are grateful for having us, that she's here with us today. So if you have any questions during our program, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I know Sandra will actively seek some involvement. So with no further ado, I'm just going to turn this episode over to Sandra.
I talk about insurance with business owners and those who are thinking about going into business and entrepreneurship. So thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. And we got a small group, so, we will be informal. Feel free to unmute, or as Barb stated, any questions as I go on, just drop it in the chat, and I will pause periodically. So feel free if you want to come off mute and share your questions. But I do like to get a sense of kind of who's in the room, who's on the Zoom. And if you're in business, what industry you're in, or if you're thinking about a business and entrepreneurship, what industry or what aspects of the business community you're thinking about working in. So if anybody would like to share, and feel free to come off mute, drop it
So
in
my
the chat.
name is Letitia Lofton. I'm looking into going into virtual assistance business.
Okay.
And then also I have a minor semi-young adult who wants to do cosmetology. So I also want to start business or manage her business also.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my name is Margarita Wilcox, and our family is establishing a business for lawn care, yard care, mowing, landscaping, and design.
Wonderful. Thank you. I just had to find a new lawn care provider for our office, so you guys do important work to beautify, that's for sure. All right, anyone else like to share? Okay, well, if not, we're gonna hop right in. I'm gonna share my screen here. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
So as Barb mentioned, I own and manage Dehan Enterprises Insurance and Financial Services, and we're an all lines insurance agency. But just kind of hopping into this discussion, when you see these calamities, situations that have happened over the last couple decades here in America and recently, what do you think they all have in common? Hurricane Helene, which happened last year in North Carolina, COVID, January 6th, where there were a group of people who they damaged and harmed people at the Capitol building in DC, Katrina, 9/11, and then the recent California fires. What do you think these things have in common? Any commonalities?
Sounds like a lot of property damage.
A lot of property damage. And also maybe physical damage too in some cases, right? Medical, life insurance, when we think about in Katrina, there were a lot of deaths. There were a lot of deaths in COVID, right? But all of these things are major insurance events. These are times when insurance really shines and stands up, right? Because of that property damage, the medical claims that came out of COVID, right? As well as disability claims, because many people couldn't work because of the impact of COVID. And as we mentioned, some of the deaths that occurred. 9/11, with the collapsing and damaging of those buildings, businesses, there were a lot of businesses that could not operate. There was property damage, there was physical damage. So all of these things are insurance events. So as it states there, every calamity is a major insurance event. And that's when people start to wonder, am I covered? Did I pay my premium? Do I have the right kind of coverage? And this is true if in personal property as well as commercial and business policies. These are some of the photographs really of just this year, the kinds of weather-related claims that we've seen. And these are photographs from Ohio, Charlotte, California, Kentucky, Cincinnati, right? Because recently Cincinnati had some damage as well. So these things are happening everywhere. And I give you a statistic I recently learned. So Ohio in 2024, I'm not sure if you guys are in Ohio or outside of the state, but particularly in Ohio, we normally have about 24 tornadoes a year. Last year, we had 76, and we've had several already, right, this year. So we're seeing kind of unprecedented weather-related claims, and then those people who have inadequate coverage or no coverage, really financial devastation and financial loss. So these are the times when we really need to insurance, and we want to understand the kind of insurance that we have. All right, so what is insurance, right? We talk a lot about insurance. Families spend a lot of money, families and businesses spend a lot of money in insurance, and we don't want you to learn it at claim time. All right, we want you to know it in advance. So it is a risk transfer tool. So instead of you as the business owner being responsible for all the losses, you share those losses with the insurance company. And then the sharing, your portion as the insured is usually your deductible, right? You pay, that's your share of the loss, and the insurance company pays the rest. If you think about car insurance, you have a deductible. Average car, I think, costs about $30,000. If that car is totaled, you're responsible for your deductible, and after that, the insurance company picks up the rest. And then insurance is only one component of risk management. And so what risk management is really thinking about what could go wrong in your business. So I'm going to pose that question to you guys. From doing lawn care services to cosmetology, virtual assistant, think about what could go wrong in your business. So as much as we want to be perfect, do the right thing, things happen, right? Anybody have any ideas?
So for as like virtual assistants and let's say Cosmo, you could have a faulty contract.
So elaborate on that. What do you mean by a faulty contract?
Okay, so let's say with virtual assistants, you got contracts amongst the employee and the consumer. And let's say something in the contract stated you would give them 35 hours of work, but you only do 10 hours of work. But you stated, like, let's say y'all had a conversation and in the conversation just via words, you stated that you would give them 10 hours of work, but your contract stated that you would do 30 hours. So I would feel like that's like a faulty contract. And then like, as far as cosmetology, so you bring on employees, like say you bring on employees and again, contract wise, you sign off, it's like a regular job. You sign off on something and you say you're gonna work so many hours, but then they tell you that they can only do so many hours. So it's like you a breach of contract, if I'm saying the word right. So a breach of contract.
Yes. So the business owner failed to perform, or they
Yes.
failed to complete the objectives of that contract. So the business owner could be sued, right, for that. That's a good example. Any other ideas? What could go wrong in your business? So think about a couple quick things. When you're in the grocery store, you see those cones often by the produce section, which just kind of denotes there's a wet floor, right? So they want you to be mindful and cautious in case of a slip and fall. Somebody in the lawn care space, if there's a rock that just shoots out from the lawnmower and breaks somebody's window, right? Or hit somebody. So now you got potentially property damage, or somebody physically, that rock hit somebody. So what kind of strategies can you implement to lessen the chances of something going wrong? Or if it goes wrong, it's not as severe, because insurance deals with frequency and severity. So I want to lessen the chances and the likelihood of it going wrong. But then if it does, I don't want it to be as severe, financially impactful. What kind of things can you do to lessen the chance of stuff going wrong?
Well, one idea is to have, proper training to make sure that the employees know how to operate all of the equipment, and also equipment has to be serviced regularly.
Yes.
Additionally, there's like different safety measures that have to be taken place. So let's say a client would want you to install irrigation, let's say. We have to, make sure that all of the gas lines, it used to be like cable lines, but we don't have that anymore. But, things like that have to be protected because you don't want to disrupt any type of service that the home would have.
Yep, exactly. Employee training, employee handbooks are huge ways to mitigate risk, right? So everybody knows their job and knows how to perform their job, right? So thinking about what could go wrong, how you mitigate those potential risks, and you routinely do it, right? You can't do it when they on board only, and a year, 2 years later, you don't go back to training. So it's always on the job enhancements and professional development, because that's going to mitigate most of your risk, because most of us are in a people business, right? So that's really managing people. Training is one of those tools to mitigate risk. And then that's what insurance is there for as well. So it's only one component of the total. And then insurance is designed to make you whole, restore you to where you were prior to the loss, right? You're not designed to profit. It's designed to indemnify you, to just make you whole. When you profit from insurance, it's called insurance fraud, right? You're not supposed to profit. However, there are times when you're going to be improved. If you think of roof damage on a home because of a weather-related storm and your roof is 20 years old, the insurance company can't give you another 20-year-old roof, right? So they're going to give you a new roof, which is their way of indemnifying. And then it's a tool to protect assets and income. Because if you don't have the insurance, you have to use whatever assets and income you have to protect or restore that loss. So we're going to hit on some of the key types of business insurance. And depending on the industry you're in, the kind of work you do will determine which line of coverage is necessary for your business. So general liability is a staple. It's kind of the foundational kind of coverage. And we'll drill down in each of these a little more. But general liability pays if any property is damaged or anyone is physically damaged in the course of you carrying out your business. Professional liability looks at that mistakes, errors and omission. This is also called E&O, or errors and omission, malpractice insurance. So if you give advice, counsel, you design, create, this is where this coverage really comes to play. And then employer coverages. If you have employees, there are a myriad of different types of employment-related insurance coverages that would be recommended. If you don't have employees, you probably don't need the employer coverages. But employees can sue their employer. And some of the common lawsuits are wrongful termination. Let's say they didn't think they should have been fired, right? Ageism or sexism, racism, all of those are the types of employment-related claims. Property coverage, and this is property that you lease. It could be property you own. If you own the building, it could be the real estate, or if you just leasing a space, it'd be your personal property inside that space. And then the last one that has really become prevalent in the last few years is data breach and cyber liability. So because we all work on the internet, we all have this risk and this exposure. Any thoughts or comments on us thus far? So here's the language that's presented in most insurance contracts for general liability. And it really simply says that the insurance company is legally will pay any of those claims where you as the insured are legally liable. And they're obligated to pay those damages because of bodily injury where someone got hurt physically or someone's property was damaged. It's those two key things. The insurance company also has a duty to defend, which means they provide you the attorneys. They have the legal expertise that instead of you having to go out and get an attorney, your business insurance policy provides you an attorney. And that's also true for your personal policies, for your business, your car insurance policies, as well as your property policies. One of the key things, though, in general liability is how is the legal expenses covered? And so my last statement down there, your defense costs can be inside your coverage limit or in addition or outside. So what that simply means is most standard liability policies now are $1 million. Sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot these days, right? So $1 million is kind of the baseline. And even if you want $500,000, it's not going to save you half the premium, right? So defense costs inside the limit means that your legal expenses would be covered inside of that $1 million. So you'd have $1 million total to pay the claim for damages and to pay the legal expenses. And as you can imagine, defense and legal costs can mount up pretty quickly and eat up a lot of that coverage that you have. Defense outside the liability limits simply means that the legal expenses are in addition. So you have your $1 million of protection to pay damages and then unlimited defense costs outside or in addition to that $1 million of liability. Many companies, you may have a choice to choose if it's going to be inside or outside, but having the knowledge to ask is important. So then when you hear the word liability, it really kind of denotes, lawsuit coverage. And there's a variety of types of liability coverage. Here's a couple additional ones here. Umbrella or excess liability. This is increased or higher levels of general liability. So if I mentioned earlier, most businesses will have at least $1 million. But if you have a contract and they want you to have 5 million, you have to pick up that other 4 million of general liability. And that 4 million is generally provided in an umbrella coverage that sits on top of your underlying policy. And that's also true on personal lines, right? So if you have auto and homeowners and you have a claim where the limits are exhausted, then it would roll into your umbrella policy. The professional liability, as I mentioned earlier, focus really around consultants, architects, insurance professionals, as myself, have to carry errors and omission coverage, the medical professionals, lawyers, architects. Anywhere there is consultative advice given, guidance, that steps up if your customer feel you fail to provide the right kind of counsel. Abuse and molestation coverage if there's alleged abuse or actual. And this is coverage for those businesses who work with vulnerable populations, children, elderly and senior populations, or those who are disabled. You see this in child care centers or youth programs really commonly, adult daycare, in-home care services. This has become a lot more common coverage. And then products liability, if you manufacture a product, if you manufacture or sell, you might be required because you may be a distributor or a retailer of a product. So this protects if your customer is harmed by that product, right? If it's a lotion and it causes irritation, or a consumable product. So anytime you're manufacturing or retailing products liability would be important. Liquor liability, if you sell or serve, right, alcohol, you would be responsible for the party that consumed that alcohol may go out and have an accident, and you could be held personally liable for that, or your business. Certainly restaurants, bars, event planners, those are the kind of entities that have liquor liability. I will tell you, if you host a party in your home, you have personal liability in your homeowner or renter's policy. But if you don't take the keys or call an Uber, you could be held personally liable for that claim that your guest may have been involved in. And then pollution liability kind of focuses around the construction trades. If they're working around or asbestos, any environmental kinds of potential pollutants, that's when this coverage may be desired or warranted. Does this make sense? Do you guys see any coverages that might be applicable to what you do? All right, I see some head shaking. So here's some quick examples. This is a gentleman was unloading some equipment on a little small hand cart, and the cart kind of got away from him, and he bumped a passerby, and she fell, hurt her elbow, and required some medical attention. So his company's general liability had to pay those medical expenses, right? The young woman did not sue them, but wanted all her medical bills paid. If she had lost a lot of time at work, that suit could have included lost wages, right, or disability, depending on how much time she had been off. So that's an example of what general liability would do. And then you think about it, we're all trying to do the right thing, but situations happen, and that's when this coverage would respond. This is an example of professional liability. So a business consultant had created a marketing strategy for a client, and the client felt it did not meet their expectations. And so the client or customer sued for damages, lost revenue that they felt they incurred. The professional liability will respond in a case like that. So shifting on, any questions or comments on the liability forms and policies? So the other area we kind of move to is property. So this is, again, anything that you own, your inventory, your equipment, your office. If you own the building, you would insure the building. Or if you lease, it is the furniture, contents that you have inside. The important thing, couple things that came up really around COVID, property off premises. So if you think of employees who work in remote, they may have company equipment, right? The company laptop, the printer, etc., that they're now using in their homes. So you want to make sure your coverage extends to property off premises. All right. If the other area I think we see a lot, inland marine, and if Margarita, in your case, you guys are taking your equipment to job sites. All right. So you're
Right.
moving around with it.
Right.
So inland marine follows that equipment wherever it is. So the fact that your equipment is not stationary, you want coverage that is kind of like a floater, is what that does. The other quick thing on business interruption, if there is damage to your building where your office is housed, where your equipment is housed, it could put you out of business. And just as those photographs I showed you earlier, the damage that's potential due to some of these weather-related claims, or it could be, a fire, or, there was an incident, I had a client where a car drove through the front of her building. All right, they found the driver had a medical episode, and actually hit her and certainly damaged a lot of the property. So the business couldn't open. That's called business interruption. It's like disability for the business. And it pays lost revenue, it pays fixed expenses while that business location is being restored. All right, huge. Excuse me. So when you talk about property, one of the other important aspects of property is valuation. How is your property valued? And in the industry, there's at least two ways. One is replacement value, or the other is actual cash value. Does anybody have any familiarity with those two terms and how they may differ? Miss Barb, you shaking your head?
Turn off my, yes, replacement costs would take into account the cost of materials today, as opposed to the deterioration of the property at the time of the loss.
Yep, the depreciation. So
That's the word I was looking for. Depreciation.
yes. So actual cash value is what it's really worth. And replacement value is what it costs if you had to replace it today with like, kind, and quality. All right. So this is true on homeowners, renters, business property, this is one of the places where I say you don't want to learn that you don't have the right coverage at the time of claim. In a quick example, think about in an office and they've got chairs, right? But these chairs have been there for 5 years or 7 years, but they're probably only worth about $10 each. But if you had to replace them, they may be $75 each or $100 each. So the $100 would be the replacement cost value, and the $10 would be the actual cash value. Significant difference, right? So you want to know how you're insured, particularly around property. So a quick example, this business worked from their home. They had a recording studio in their basement. Okay, so he had a lot of equipment, instruments there, but they only had homeowners insurance. So the homeowners policy did not cover everything that was damaged, but the commercial property coverage would. And it would have also provided that business interruption coverage where they could not operate in that space. So the potential lost revenue could also have been replaced. So you have to think about there are times when you can extend business coverage on a homeowner's policy or a renter's policy or a condo policy, right? If your insurance company allows you to do that, you can do that. It's less expensive, of course, than getting your own business policy. But insurance companies typically do not like businesses in home that have a lot of traffic. You have a lot of customers coming to your home. But the common ones are, a consultant working just at a computer with office and home. There are in-home childcare centers is another one that's been well accepted by many insurance companies. So depending on what you do, you want to get or extend coverage onto your homeowner policy that covers your business materials and equipment. Okay, if your carrier will do it, if your homeowner carrier will do it, it will likely be less expensive, but you got to ask the questions. Inland marine, this is the example I was given earlier about the lawn care equipment. Here's another one where just your laptop in your car and you got some product samples in your car and they were stolen out of your car. All right, so your car insurance doesn't pay for that. These would be covered under inland marine policy on a property policy for your business. Any thoughts, comments on this property? Okay, having none, I'm going to continue on. Business auto, and this coverage looks very much like personal auto or personal car insurance. The real difference is there are generally higher limits of coverage. So you may have $1 million on the auto policy or $500,000. And generally, personal auto policies have less coverage than that. But it functions the same way. If someone is damaged or hurt in a vehicle accident, your policy will pay the medical, lost wages, or if you're sued for that injured party. It also would pay to repair or replace your vehicle with the comprehension and collision coverages. Another important highlight I want to raise is the last statement there, hired non-owned auto. So what this is, coverage when the business doesn't own vehicles, but you have employees who use their business for work, right? It could be going to appointments to meet customers or clients. It could be running errands to the post office for the business. So if that employee is in an accident on a work-related or during the work hours, the business's auto liability coverage extends on top of that employee's personal auto policy. All right, so the driver has to have auto insurance. And if they're involved in a claim, work-related, now the business policy of the company extends on top of that employee's policy. We see this claim a lot. Even if you don't own, as I said, usually if you don't own vehicles, you add this coverage to your general liability policy.
So does that mean that the driving records of your employees would have an impact on the premiums that you would pay?
They really don't. The insurance company is not really insuring every driver individually, right? They just want to know that the employer has verified they have car insurance, right? So maybe annually, you know, they're collecting that information. All right. Good question. Any other comments on what we've discussed so far? So this next coverage, I'm sure we've all heard about and seen, is cyber and data breach. And what these coverages respond to is if there's a breach or compromise of personal identifiable information or personal health information, PII or PHI. And there's generally two ways it occurs: from outside hackers going into your system or rogue employees who have access to your information and use it inappropriately. So when we talk about cyber, there's several types of data breach and cyber risk. So the cyber risk is just that the hackers, the criminal that comes into your systems, right? And so not only do they disrupt the system, but they also think about the financial loss. If you use your website to do financial transactions, your customers pay you through your website. So now maybe they cannot. Or we've seen incidences where hackers manipulated access to your system and now diverting your payments to a different bank account. All right, so there's a lot of exposure, not just the inconvenience of the system not being available, but the financial loss and the disruption to your company. And also reputation, right? There's reputational costs, because how do your customers feel about you now that these kinds of losses have occurred? The other risk we have as small businesses is technology risk. So you think about all these new platforms and efficiencies, and Miss Letitia talked about virtual assistants. Maybe you're using a virtual assistant who now have access to your technology. So how secure is that organization's data who now has access to your data? All right. So as we're all exploring new ways to be more efficient, to sell more, to reduce costs, we're also opening up new risk that we may not have thought about or contemplated. And the last risk is third-party risk. And these are third-party vendors that have access to our data. So a lot of small businesses are using third parties to do, you know, HR management, payroll. You know, we use a company that helps us with marketing to our clients. So think about all of those vendors who now have access to your information. This is like the highest risk occurrence that's happening around cyber and data breach. If you guys remember Target's breach, that was from a vendor that Target used, and that vendor's data was, that vendor had been compromised, and they kind of opened the window for the criminal to get into Target. And one of the recent ones with United Healthcare, Change Insurance, which was a third-party vendor to United Healthcare. And that was huge because their members' claims couldn't be processed, people couldn't pick up prescriptions, and that occurred because of a third-party vendor. So what we're learning is we have to vet those vendors, and they have to have the same security protocols as your business has in order for you to lessen the risk that they could create for you. Any questions, comments on this? I know we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but we found that this is one of the most prevalent losses that insurance companies are seeing and businesses are experiencing, and many businesses are just being shut down. You know, they're not able to recover. So liability policies have multiple coverages, all right? And these are just the four broad areas. So the liability is that lawsuit coverage, right? If you are sued because you failed to protect the data of your employees or your customers. Business income is that business interruption, similarly, as I mentioned earlier, if you can't operate. So now there's lost revenue. This line of coverage helps to replace that lost revenue. And the breach response, has anybody gotten a letter from a financial institution or a retailer that says your data may have been compromised? So the law says you have to notify your customers that their data could have been breached. So that's what breach response is. It does that, and there's a cost if you think about it, right? There's a cost to communicate that. So this pays for that communication. It also pays for restoration of your systems, and extortion, try to figure out what the heck happened, how did it happen, why did it happen. And then the last area is cybercrime. This is where criminals are just defrauding people. The term social engineering means that, and you guys may have experienced this too, where an imposter tends to be, they tend to impersonate one of the higher authorities and direct you and your firm to send payments to somebody bogus, right? Where this is one of the highest claims losses, right? Because employees, we work remote and everywhere, employees are not walking to the cubicle and say, hey, did you send me this email and ask me to do this? This is kind of unusual, right? But we're just moving transactions through. So this is one of the high loss areas as well.
Do insurance companies have a minimum standard procedure that a business should be following in order to obtain this kind of coverage?
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. So you have to have some level of protocols in order for the coverage to be offered. A couple of those quickly, obviously, is MFA, multi-factor authentication. So now they want that on anytime people are accessing your systems. Backup. They want to know what your third-party vendors are doing. So there's a questionnaire that you have to go through before you'd be eligible for coverage. And oftentimes I send that questionnaire and ask the business owner to have their IT people look at it and fill it out, right? Because if you don't have the criteria met today, this is a guide, right? To help move them to become eligible. The industry has really improved. Rates have come down on cyber. You don't have to buy $1 million. You could buy 50,000 or a couple 100,000. So just so that you have some coverage. So we're seeing rates really become much more reasonable than a number of years ago.
Also, I understand that if you want to pursue any business with the government, they're implementing some standards that their contractors have to adhere to. So that's becoming a more and more popular topic for all of our clients is
Yes.
how do they meet that standard in order to be able to be government contractors. So this is
Yep.
a really hot topic here.
And then I can share that information for you, Barb, so you can see what the minimums are. Here in Franklin County was requiring $5 million of cyber liability.
Wow.
And, you know, we've had clients just not be able to meet that requirement only because their revenue is 300,000, right? So their revenue didn't support that level of coverage or risk. So we've had recommending they go back to the county and say, hey, I can't get that coverage, number one. And, you know, do I really need it? And the county has been responsive and saying, okay, we'll take 2 million or we'll take 1 million. But you really have to be proactive to negotiate with the county to make it make sense, because the carriers won't make it available, you know. All right, so just shifting a little bit, all of those were property and liability coverages. So now we're shifting a little bit to group medical, life, disability coverage, the employee benefit side of the house. So you think about your employees want what you want, right? We want good health insurance. We want retirement plans. We want disability if I get hurt. So how do you as a small business, begin to offer some of these programs? So for group business insurance, you can offer group health insurance if you have at least 2 people on payroll. Okay, these are not the 1099 contractors. They have to be on payroll, working at least 30 hours a week. You can offer group health insurance. You know, we encourage small businesses, if you can offer group health, do group health. And then the dental, vision, disability, do it voluntary. Let employees pick and choose that and pay for it, right? And then as you grow over time, you can start to add those benefits in and cover some of the costs of those. Think about key person. If you know you are the key person in your business, if you don't make it home after a day's work, how will your family maintain their standard of living? So that's life insurance. And that's key person is what the industry calls it for businesses. The business can pay for that for you, for your family. So think about how we use the corporate checkbook to address some of our personal needs, right? And it's tax efficient, it is legal, it's just setting things up properly to allow it to be done. Again, this is on key person, life insurance and disability. If you're unable to work, how do you get income? And here again, the business can offer group life insurance for employees, which a couple dollars, $5 a month per employee. And they can also offer disability. And disability insurance replaces up to 2/3 of your income if you're unable to work because of accident or sickness. Okay, huge benefits. And we just, you know, I think the key thing is that you become aware of these coverages and really start to explore them. This is just a quick slide on life insurance. Only about half of Americans own any form of life insurance. That is either through an employer or a personal policy. But life insurance is a critical way to protect families, protect your business. And GoFundMe is not life insurance. I just had to say that, right? GoFundMe is not life insurance. The number one reason that only half of Americans have life insurance is because they think it costs too much and they've never gotten a quote. And I will tell you, it's probably cheaper than your cable bill, than your cell phone bill, and mani and pedis, okay? So it's designed to provide cash when you need it most. So these are some of the things that it can do. And also one of the important things I will lift up here, that death benefits of life insurance pass tax-free to the beneficiaries. So if you got $1 million in life insurance, your family gets that $1 million tax-free. Huge benefit. So questions, comments, I'll pause right here before we kind of close this up. You find any of this valuable? Learn anything you didn't know before?
Absolutely. There's a lot to go over. How about how would you suggest a new small business owner seeks these kind of insurance? What would they look for in an agent that could help
Yes,
them the best?
it's a good question. You know, one of the things I say, you want to work with someone who specializes in business insurance. I mean, we love our car and homeowner agents, but that's probably their specialty and not business specialty. So I think identifying business insurance professionals who that's primarily their work, right, is where I would start. And then it's important, you want to build a relationship with that party because they want to, you want them to understand what you do so they can make the right kind of recommendations for you. And then ask, you know, friends and other business people, right, who they work with, or professionals like at the Small Business Development Center, because they got professionals on a list that they kind of recommend to business owners. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I always look at insurance agents as sort of like doctors for your business finance, and they can't prescribe things for you if you don't tell them what the symptoms are, if they don't know what your
Yes.
situation is. So yeah, absolutely, you know, having a good building a good relationship and telling them all the things that they need to know is really important.
Yeah. So it can make the right recommendation. So what's interesting, so I insured a couple, one was a little sandwich shop, not far from downtown. And so one day I went in, I insured them for sandwiches and coffee. And then one day I went in, they had a bar, right? So I'm like, when did y'all start this? Because you're not insured for that. You know? So because I do try to get out and frequent and support my clients, so I get to kind of see what they're doing too, because I mean I don't know. So and then they weren't properly insured for the new thing that they were doing. So you have to. It's a two-way street. I think we as professionals need to check in at least once a year with our clients, but our clients need to check in when they're making changes to their business. All right. So these are just some helpful strategies. You know, you want to understand your coverages. And that again is working with a professional who can kind of guide you, make recommendations, and then can explain it to you. And so you can say, yeah, this fits what I need. Maybe this does not. And I know I talked about a lot of different coverages here, but you can purchase comprehensive policies that could include the general liability, professional, the property, you know, some cyber, all on one policy, right? So you want to look for policies that can offer multiple coverages on one contract. And then business insurance is a tax-deductible business expense. So, you know, you want to make sure you're maximizing tax advantages around these policies as well. And think about risk management protocols, not just insurance, but think about what could go wrong in your business and how are we creating strategies that kind of can mitigate and lessen that risk. If you use remote workers, you got to treat your remote workers like they work in the office. And you know, you got to give them breaks. You got to provide just quality equipment to help them make sure that they are treated like any other employee. Update your business when services change. That's kind of what we were just talking about. When you're doing something different, we see a lot of small business who may start off on one line, let's say a barber, right? But then they start doing manis and petties, right? Or they start selling a product, you know, that they weren't before. So oftentimes you may pick up an ancillary service, but then you want to make sure your insurance kind of evolves as you do with those new services, because you may not be insured for that. Plan times to review, you know, every year, every couple years with your agent. And then, as I said, I think it's always important to work with a professional. Thoughts, questions? Here's my contact information if we can ever be of assistance, and all the things that we do. Anyway, want to share at least one thing you learned that you think would be impactful for your business?
So like I said, VA, I learned regardless if you're in a building or if you at home, that any location is required to be insured. I never knew certain insurance that you spoke of, I never knew even existed. So that was a plus for today.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd also like to say that the inland marine insurance is really an important concept that I had not really thought about as far as like equipment being, off-site and things that could happen. I mean, I thought about liability, if we cause damage to somebody's property installing a landscape or, God forbid, I don't know, a mower crashes into the corner of a house or something,
Yeah.
that's liability. But the idea of that, coverage following that equipment when it's not stationary is really important. So
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
really good.
And even we've seen, business owners in a similar industry where they might have a storage facility where they
Right.
store their equipment.
Yeah.
That storage facility you want to identify on your policy too.
Yes.
Right? That's good. Anybody else?
All right. Any other questions
you.
or comments? All right. Well, since we are at about that time, Sandra, I wanted to thank you so much for all of this incredible information. That's a little bit overwhelming, I know. So if anyone would like to revisit all of the categories, you will be able to take a look at our meeting tonight on our YouTube channel, which is at Ohio SBDC. Give us a couple days to add some neato intro music and bells and whistles to it, but it should be up on there. You should be able to get that's on just contact information as well. And I do want to invite everyone to join us for additional topics in this series. So pay attention to those as they come up. You'll also be able to see those on our website, which is sbdccolumbus.com. But other than that, thank you once again, Sandra, and everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great evening. Stay safe and take care of business.
Same.